The Congress party seems to have done little for itself in the past several years, except survive by winning the odd election. It has lost governments in states where it won. It has been unable to revive itself in Uttar Pradesh despite Priyanka Gandhi Vadra's efforts and remains a negligible force. It has done little to no stock-taking, with President Sonia Gandhi seeing all debate as dissent and hence disloyal. 23 senior leaders have been sidelined because they wanted a discussion within. Rahul Gandhi is vocal but is unable to handle the party organizations. In Punjab, where the Congress government was doing well, the party has opened doors to rebellion by appointing Chief Minister Amrinder Singh's arch-rival Sidhu as the state party chief. In Chhattisgarh too, rebellion has reared its head, threatening the stability of the Congress government. The Congress seems to want to anchor an opposition coalition, but for this has to get its act together, revive and build, and work to gain the trust and confidence of the regional parties that it has lost over the years. Welcome. Our guest today is Shashi Tharoor. I don't think he needs an introduction. He's a writer, he's an orator, he's a parliamentarian, he's a congressman. And he's always in the news, even when he doesn't want to be in the news.
Especially when I don't want to be.
Especially when you don't want to be. So welcome, Shashi, and thank you for giving us this time. I'm going to come straight to the point. It's just like we are going to have a discussion on the Congress, because the Congress is obviously key to coalition politics, and the ability to build up a coalition to face the BJP, etc., is going to rest very much on the Congress. So now we have 23 Congress leaders who had come together a while ago. And I'm talking about them because Kapil Sibal just held an opposition meeting as well. And for introspection, for discussion, for debate, and of course, course correction. Now it seems, from whatever we in the media seem to pick up, is that the Nehru Gandhi family doesn't seem to be interested in what they have to say. And in fact, their dissent of all your senior colleagues and is like seen as dissent and disloyalty.
Well, look, I think I can't speak for them, and so it would not be right for me to say that they don't see it that way.
Okay.
But it's not true that they're not interested, because Sonia ji held a very good, 3.5, almost 4-hour conversation with some of us. She couldn't invite 23, but she invited about 7 of us. And there were 8 other senior leaders, or 8 or 9 other senior leaders. And a very good conversation ensued for about 3.5 hours on the larger issues that had prompted the letter and that we felt needed to be resolved. I think, honestly, in all fairness to the Congress leadership, COVID hasn't been a great time to resolve all of this. And that's why you will find that many of the G23, as the media has, I think, wrongly dubbed them, because it really isn't an organization. We are individuals within the Congress organization. But anyway, why they have been relatively silent of late is because they do understand that some of what we wanted to thrash out could not have been done in this time period. But what we want to see is an active, effective, and strong Congress, because we believe that's all we need to actually undo the damage that's been done to this country over the last 7 years.
So a lot of people share that now. I mean, even people who didn't support the Congress yesterday are looking at the Congress today, right? But you don't see that in Punjab. I mean, you have dissent, and you've got factionalism, and you've got almost a rebellion going on in Punjab, in Chhattisgarh, and Punjab on the eve of elections. So how does this sort of fit into this whole scheme that they are interested in a course correction?
Yeah, I would say that if you look at Punjab, and certainly I think the story is different in each state. So yeah, Chhattisgarh is a
slightly different
kind of situation. Yeah. But I would say that as far as Punjab is concerned, people are very much focused on the election. In fact, it's precisely because both of those groups within the Congress party believe that the Congress has every opportunity to come back to power, that the stakes, as it were, in this little internecine conflict are so high. If they felt they were fighting over chairs on the Titanic, there wouldn't be much of a fight, right? So it's because they believe the Congress is coming back to power. And this is unfortunately something that's entirely typical of many, many democratic political parties in our country, that there are groups, there are factions. I've experienced it throughout my time in the Congress Party in Kerala, where the factions are so strongly formalized, they even have their own names as Congress I and Congress A. And literally they almost run the party as a confederation of two groups. So it's not an unusual or unprecedented or unknown phenomenon. Yes, there are some interesting challenges here when two strong and colorful personalities sometimes find themselves at odds. I say sometimes because we've also seen moments of great affection and mutual respect between the two of them. In Chhattisgarh, in fact, I think whatever little disagreement there is between two people who are amongst the closest of allies for a very long time. So the important thing to realize is you're talking about individuals who broadly share the same philosophy, the same commitment to the party and the party organization, and the same determination to see the party succeed, but differ either on issues of certain principles or on issues of certain individuals and who should be doing what and how they should be doing it. This is what unfortunately, politics sometimes gets reduced to. It's who gets what and who gets what when and so on. And I think that's not something that I'm saying as a congressman, but just as somebody who, like you, is an observer of Indian politics. I wish there were less of that happening and more of focus on what are the larger issues at stake in our country. I think I've written this, and I'll say it to you directly, that I believe that what we're witnessing now is nothing less than a struggle for India's soul, and that the 2024 elections may be our last chance to preserve the kind of India that was that won its freedom 75 years ago, and that embodies an idea encapsulated in the language of the Constitution. I think the constitutional nationalism of India is actually under threat from the Hindutva nationalism of the last 7 years. And if that sounds exaggerated, well, I don't want you to find out the wrong way that I was right. And I don't see you as Seema, I know you broadly agree with me since I read you. But just generally speaking, people who are focused on the ephemeries and on the sort of tangential political squabbles are missing this very large wood while they focus on the trees.
See, now what you're saying is really what goes into the criticism that one is hearing about the Congress, is because everybody wants, or everybody on the other side wants the Congress to have that cutting edge, to be an organization that is responsive. It's not, like as business as usual. And somehow you keep getting that feeling that despite what you just said, that it's a fight for the soul of India, the Congress party per se doesn't seem to be understanding that, or at least not reflecting that, and not getting the confidence of the people that indeed it is looking upon it as such a fight.
Seema, you're far too senior a journalist to believe that everything that a party is doing is what's visible outside. I mean, that is simply not the case. I can be indiscreet and reveal that this morning I had a very good hour-long discussion over Zoom with people like Rahul Gandhi, Dr. Manmohan Singh, Salman Khurshid, discussing the party's stand on the big hot button foreign policy issue of today, namely Afghanistan. Now, it's a kind of conversation you don't hear about. The fact that there is such a group that they meet is irrelevant to the outside world, but it shows you that the party is busy at work on this issue. Similarly, Rahul Gandhi must be having a dozen meetings a day that no one hears about. There are some you do hear about because statements come out of them and so on. There are many you don't hear about. I can tell you that when it comes to focusing on elections and so on, whether it's Punjab, whether it's a UP, there are conversations taking place we don't know about. So I'm not worried, even as one who signed that particular letter. I'm not worried that the party is asleep, even if some in the media seem to portray it that way. I know it's not asleep, there's a lot happening. The question I think that many colleagues have is not so much about what is actually being done, but how broadly it's being done. I mean, how many people can be caught up and involved in these important discussions? And then secondly, how can we communicate effectively to the public, to the skeptical public, with skeptical media making that kind of sound, that we actually know what we're doing, we have a game plan, and it's for them and in their interest. Now, there are differences of opinion. Clearly, I'm one of those who believe we can be doing things a bit differently and presenting them a bit differently. But that doesn't mean that we are in any way, disillusioned with the party or about to jump ship or any of that stuff. That's not what this is about. This is all about honest disagreements about how to make the party stronger and more effective.
So what, I mean, I'm sure there are discussions, and I'm sure there are discussions on foreign policy, etc. But we really judge by what we see on the ground. So we are seeing this infighting in Punjab, or we're seeing it in Chhattisgarh. And then we are seeing the absence of an organization in what everybody acknowledges is the key state, Uttar Pradesh, which was once a Congress bastion. And because of that, India was belonged to the Congress party. And this is something the Bharatiya Janata Party has shown us, that yes, it is it is UP which holds the key to the rest of India in one sense of the word. But where is the organization? It doesn't seem to be there. And the regional parties like Samajwadi and RJD, who are now come together, don't seem to have trust in the Congress.
Look, the two separate points there. I don't agree with the second. I agree with the first. But I agree with the first only to the tune that the same story does not occur in every state. Congress is a big party that has fallen upon hard times in some states, but is still very much a strong, viable government in waiting in other states, and of course is the government in 2 or 3 states. So yeah, I don't want us to generalize that the organization is atrophied or collapsed. I would simply say that if you look objectively at what has happened in UP, I think the honest thing to say is that we have, over the years, in the last sort of quarter of a century, the last generation, if you like, we have ceded place to regional parties. I think the Mandal Commission was the first major blow, and subsequent developments, including the rise of the BJP, etc., have completely, in many ways, destroyed the social basis on which the Congress stood. But to my mind, that is not the insuperable problem that your question implied, Seema, because though it is true that Congress ruled India because it had UP, it ruled India on its own because it had UP, but it can still rule India in partnership with like-minded parties that would be perhaps ruling in UP. So I'm one of those who for some time has argued, I wrote after the 2014 election defeat an article suggesting 9 steps forward for the Congress. And it was actually an article based on a memo I had given the Congress president at that time. And one of them was that we really now have to be prepared for coalition making. I fully understand the logic that there are some places where we will not want to go in for coalitions because we believe we are still viable and we are undermining our own party and demoralizing our own workers if we're handing over seats to other people. But there are some states where the electoral writing on the wall is so clear that it doesn't make sense for us to stand on pride or on ego.
As in UP.
Makes more sense. Well, I leave you to draw the conclusions, but I certainly would be one of those who would say that there are some states where coalitions would have been indicated and desirable. I certainly can now say, because the election is over, that I had advocated an alliance with Trinamool Congress in Bengal. I advocated informally. I'm not part of any formal forum where the Congress discusses that. But that again is the kind of thing some of us want, is more opportunities to be heard in forums within the party, offering different points of view. So certainly you can deduce from that UP is the kind of state where I do believe we would benefit from.
Yeah, and you know, these mistakes at one point before 2014, or even earlier than that, these kind of mistakes were accommodated in the political environment of the country if you made a strategic political mistake. Today, when it's such a cutting election and so closely contested, and as you yourself said, muscle power, money power, ideology, every dirty trick in the book, or not so dirty even, they're all there on the table. And then when the Congress makes these kind of mistakes, given the fact that it has such a wealth of thought amongst its members, it really drags you back. You know, it really, I mean, Mamata Banerjee could have almost lost the election. She didn't, is another story. But that you don't know until the results come out. So before the results come out, everybody should be together, shouldn't they? I mean, they should do everything they can to make sure that they are together and there's a coalition up there.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with that. Again, the only caveat I'd make is it still will depend state by state how we go and what we, because there is in each state a certain history, a certain electoral calculus, a certain social base for alternative parties. And so it's not that we automatically ally with regional parties everywhere because our only interest in defeating the BJP. That could be true in a majority of cases, but there will be some cases where we may not find it prudent to do that. But all I'm saying is that certainly Bengal was an obvious case where we should have done that. And there are at least 2 or 3 other states where it seems to me equally obvious.
Yeah, and it's, it's something like you find because of this, the regional parties sort of keep away. I mean, you had so many parties in the top leadership attending the conclave that, say, Kapil Sibal, who's a congressperson and doesn't say he's not, held. And then you had so many fewer parties and second-ranked leaders attending the conclaves hosted by the top family of the party. So there has to be a certain trust, and there seems to be a trust deficit. And I think, before I go on to the next and almost the last question, because I know even you have to go, is that as a journalist, it seems very simple. I mean, just leave it to the regional parties where they are strong in the states, and where the Congress is fighting the BJP directly, it can build coalitions and get support and fight them and take the bulk of the seats. It's such a simple formula, but somehow you guys don't seem to be doing that.
No, I'll tell you why. Because leave it to the regional parties is a surrender, and that the party cannot possibly do, because one of the things that makes us a distinctive and viable opposition is that we are a national party, that we have a footprint everywhere. Even when we won only 44 seats in 2014, we won them in more parts of the country than the BJP had. We won 2 seats here and 1 seat there, where we had won 20 earlier and 15. But that 2 and 1 was everywhere, northeast, southwest, northwest, southeast. And the fact is the BJP didn't have that in 2014. Of course, 2019 was a different story. But my argument remains that we cannot just completely and totally surrender, but we can certainly recognize honestly which are the states in which it is better to let a more powerful regional party lead and for us to follow, and which are the states where we lead and a regional party follows, and which are the states where we say, thank you, regional party, we don't really need you because this is something that we've been doing and we want to continue to do. It has to be state by state. It has to be done in an honest, objective way. It's got to be the kind of decisions that veteran observers like you will not second guess and say, oh, what a terrible decision they've made, which is what you're saying about some of the decisions we have made so far. But with that footnote, I would say that's the kind of balance we need. So I would say in Tamil Nadu, we did absolutely the right thing in going with the DMK. And frankly, we did so largely on their terms. They determined the number of seats and so on. In Bihar, we did largely the right thing in going with Tejasvi Yadav and Lalu Prasad Yadav ji, but at the same time, there was an issue about which seats we contested and whether they were at all winnable. So again, each state has its own pattern, its own issue. In Gujarat, even if you wanted to ally with the regional party, which one is there? You've got to stand up and fight the BJP
Absolutely.
alone.
That's what I was saying, yeah.
So that's how it is. And in Maharashtra, we do have the NCP, and now it seems we have the Shiv Sena as well. So there are adjustments that are also evolving. Our politics never stays static.
Okay, so now let me just conclude with two. One is a slightly personal question, and one is, of course, I'm going to put you in the role of a soothsayer, and so that you can tell us what's going to happen. You've been in the eye of a storm always on personal matters or political matters. Did you get the support that you expected from the party, or were you pretty much left on your own to sort matters out?
Well, I think I'm going to sort of take a pass on that question simply because it's too long and complicated, and I don't really think either you or I want to go over dredge up details, and we don't need to. I would say that on the personal front, while it was essentially a personal problem, the party was as supportive as I could have hoped for. They didn't make it political, and that was probably right, because I think you don't really want to go before a judge on a matter like this and have anything other than the merits of the case being reviewed. So if you make it an explicitly political matter, you are inviting such a framing, as it were, of the question. So I think the party was as supportive as I could have expected. On the various other sort of unwanted controversies, some of them arose within the party, so I can hardly expect the party institutionally to be supportive. In some others, the party did rally strongly behind me. In some others, some individuals did and did not. This is part of the game. All I can say is I have not been made to feel unwelcome in the party or disowned by the party, except there have been a couple of sort of, I must say, trivial issues where I genuinely believe I was right and the party was wrong, but the party's motives I could fully understand. I mean, the classic example is when I said before the 2019 elections that we have to fight the BJP because if they win, they will turn this country into a Hindu Pakistan. And my party spokespeople scurried away to denounce me, saying should never use a phrase like that. Well, I'm sorry, the phrase was Jawaharlal Nehru's. It is in class 8 civics textbooks in the CBSE syllabus. So I don't take my words back. I believe I said the right thing. And I believe Nehruji left us with that idea. But I could understand the party's motives. They felt that Hindu sentiment had been so inflamed by the opportunism of the BJP, that the BJP had managed to say this Congress is anti-Hindu, that Shashi Tharoor saying Hindu Pakistan will immediately confirm that Shashi Tharoor as a Congress leader is anti-Hindu and all this nonsense. So
the party has to really sort this out. This is one major thing which the Congress is sort of completely, chaotic and confused about. The whole Muslim identity, the issue of secularism. When you say Muslim, the party runs for its life. I'm
not sure that's entirely, not entirely true. Again, the size of the country becomes an issue because there are some behaviors that are specifically linked to political realities in northern states, which are foreign to us in the South. I mean, I have a particular political profile in Kerala, even though my own parliamentary constituency has only 10% Muslim votes. Yeah. But I stand for a certain set of principles that I've imbibed long before I came into the Congress party.
And that's how
I wrote my biography of Nehru before I joined the Congress. So for me, my ideas and principles are what I bring to the party, not that I learn from the party. And therefore, I didn't feel any particular desire to disown words that were, in my case, I believe, thoughtfully expressed. So there you had the unusual situation of my own party spokesman disowning me and Sitaram Yechuri defending me, which I was happy about, but that is not the objective. The objective is for us really to stand together on most issues. But I also understand that a lot of these are ephemeral controversies. They literally are there for a 24-hour news cycle. And then the next sort of outrage or the next headline or scandal comes up.
They're temporary only because if you take the personalities involved, but the issues are pretty deep and they remain, And
the issues are deep. I want to stress that on the question of what I think is still wrongly called secularism, but which is actually, in my view, a question of the acceptance of religious difference and of Indian plurality.
Absolutely.
On that question, the Congress stand is unambiguous. I have it from Rahul Gandhi himself. I have it from Sonia Gandhi herself. They are not prepared to compromise on that. In fact, I can tell you that Rahul Gandhi once said, I don't believe in Hindutva, whether of the soft kind or the hard kind. And I think on this issue, there is no compromise. If we stand for anything, we stand for the basic issue that divided the nation in 47. What was that issue? It wasn't North-South, it wasn't geography, it wasn't Marxist versus communist, it wasn't ideology. It was on one simple question, and that is religion the determinant of nationhood? And those who believed that religion determined their identity went away. They created Pakistan. And those who remained not only insisted that their freedom struggle was for everybody and they would create a nation for everybody, but they spent 2.5 years in the Constituent Assembly thrashing this out. There were people who stood up and said, listen, Pakistan has been created for Muslims, shouldn't we declare ourselves a Hindu state? It was debated. It's not as if these are sort of new debates. It's part of the foundational reality of our country that this is what India is all about. And that is the idea of India the Congress Party fought for, and it's the idea of India the Congress Party must defend. The day we abandon this idea, we will no longer be the Indian National Congress. And so as far as I'm concerned, we will continue to stick for that. So let me assure you there is no doubt about it. There may be some doubts about emphasis or statement, or is it wise to say something in a particular state with an election around the corner, or some such kind of thing. That happens all the time because obviously people are worried about their electoral fortunes. But on the principle, I'm prepared to stand up and shout it from the rooftops, at least when there is no election around the corner in North India, that as far as most of us in the South are concerned, and I believe the Congress leadership is concerned, this is a non-negotiable principle. We are a party that stands for the equality of every Indian citizen, abhors religious discrimination, and will not permit the demonization of a community in our country to proceed as it has been under BJP rule.
So we are going to see this in a pretty strong way in the UP elections, right?
Absolutely. There's no question about
this. Okay.
Absolutely no question about that. In fact, let me tell you that I actually feel that being unapologetic about one's own beliefs is the best way forward in politics. As you know, I wrote a book called Why I'm a Hindu. I have not hesitated to go and worship in temples. I've equally not hesitated to go to churches and mosques and synagogues when they'll have me for special occasions. It's my way of showing respect to their beliefs. And that is what I have imbibed from my study of Swami Vivekananda, that I will respect your faith, please respect my faith. And I know that very deeply devout Muslims, including preachers, imams, and mullahs, appreciate me all the more because they believe my convictions are genuine, that I'm not pandering to them by hiding my own Hinduism while defending their rights, that I'm defending their rights as I would defend my own. That's what Indian politics ought to be all about.
Okay, so now last question, 2024. Do you need a party or do you need a personality to counter Prime Minister Modi?
This is a debate that I know has been going on for some time, particularly in the public space. I've been an advocate of a presidential system for some time, but I'm not an advocate of a presidential system being grafted onto a parliamentary system. As far as I'm concerned, only the voters of Varanasi get a choice of Mr. Narendra Modi. Otherwise, else you look at your candidate, look what he stands for, look at his track record. And as far as we are concerned, I believe not only that we should have a party collectively that puts up good candidates with a good manifesto and goes to victory, but we should also have a good coalition we should be part of, in which other allied parties join us in a kind of UPA 3, even before the election. So we are giving the voter a clear choice. Let's never forget that the BJP won only 37% last year. Last time, 2019. Let's never forget that 63% of the Indian public had their votes going in 15 different directions. And if there's a lesson we can learn from that, it is that 63%, if even 40% of that had held together, we would have been able to defeat the forces of division that the BJP represent in our country. Instead, we were the ones who were divided. So I will say to you very clearly that this is what I'm advocating. I am no one to speak on behalf of the party or behalf of anybody else, because I don't actually participate in making this call. But in as much as my views may be sought, in as much as I have a chance to express this point of view, this is what I will battle for. I think we should be working together. And as I've said before, one of our most effective slogans in 2014, which came towards the end of the campaign, it was abandoned too quickly, is the one that I would want in 2024. And that slogan is, Main Nahi Hum. This has been a government of main for the last 7 years, and will be that for 10 years. Let us, for God's sake, have a movement of hum, of people coming together across all walks of life, all regions, religions, languages, and parties to save India. That's what I'm all about.
Perfect. Okay, Shashi, thank you so much. This was very interesting, and it's been after a while. Thanks a lot. Well, there you have it. Shashi Tharoor, who is one of the most outspoken Congress persons, is actually hopeful that the party will come together before it is too late. He feels that there is debate, that there's discussion, that they formulate policy, that Rahul Gandhi and Sonia Gandhi have their hearts in the right place, and also are building a strategy around their commitment to justice, to equality, against discrimination, for secularism, etc., etc. But in my view, while this might be going on, the perception still remains that the Congress has lit a fire under Amrinder Singh in Punjab by bringing in Sidhu. So a fairly stable government is now, under the Congress rule, is now fighting each other. Chhattisgarh, there's factionalism. Kerala, there is factionalism. In Uttar Pradesh, which is a key state and crucial for 2024, the Congress has not got its act together. The Samajwadi Party and other regional parties do not have the confidence and the trust that they should in the Congress. Everybody believes and acknowledges that the Congress is really the nucleus and should be the nucleus of a larger coalition opposition politics. But that the Congress party is not being able to fulfill that role because it is not being able to inspire the trust in the regional parties that it will accommodate them and not walk over them. And until it changes its viewpoint and it brings in more respect for the regional parties, as it has shown to Stalin, as Tharoor pointed out, and the DMK in Tamil Nadu, it is going to find it very difficult to be able to become the fulcrum of a coalition opposition. And without that also, then coalition building in itself will become very, very difficult. Thank you.